This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Harry's, the shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. Go to harrys.com and use the promo code MacVoices to let them know you appreciate a superior shave. Welcome to Mac Notables on MacVoices. This is the talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joiner. Folks, we have Mr. Adam Engst with you. Adam, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Chuck, and all the folks in Tulsa.
Yes, we actually have a live audience. We have the Tulsa Macintosh Users Group, Tulsa Macintosh User Society. Do I have that right?
Tulsa Users of Macintosh Society, yes.
Got it.
TUMS.
Okay. Great, TUMS. And Lynn Wegley is kind enough to host us along with the folks at TUMS, so we really appreciate it. So, Adam, we're supposed to entertain these folks for a little while.
It's the all singing, all dancing approach.
Yeah, the old soft shoe, right?
I'll have to point my camera down if you want that.
Yeah, I don't think that... I'm not prepared for that. I don't know about you. So I thought we might start out with Macworld, since we're both now back and theoretically recovered from the beating, which is always a fun beating.
It's a long 3 days. I mean, I even slept relatively well this time, but man, you're on your feet and talking to people for 16 hours a day. It just wears on you. Not that I don't like it, but it still gets wearing. And then the red eye home always takes it out of you.
Oh, I did the red eye too, and I hate the red eye. So, Adam, I guess let's start with an overall picture of Macworld. Macworld has evolved from what it used to be into something quite a bit different, I think, and I'm not sure, but I think I like it better this way. How about you?
Honestly, I do too. I mean, before, when Apple came and the really big companies were there, as a member of the press, frankly, my job was to ignore all the really big companies who had obvious stuff that was being announced in big ways and you could cover relatively quickly, and try to find the cool companies who were doing stuff that you hadn't heard about before. Back in the day when Apple would have a big booth in South Hall, and all the big companies would be clustered around Apple. The goal was always to cover them as quickly as possible, so you go over to the North Hall and see all the cool little companies.
And it seemed, it's fascinating to me, the people that say, "Oh, I don't want to go because Apple's not there anymore." When you're absolutely right, the small cool companies were the things we were all looking for. Sure, we made a stop by at the Apple booth to see whatever there was, but usually it was either A, so packed by the people that couldn't see it anywhere else, or B, just packed in general, and you already saw it at the keynote or knew everything there was to know. So now we have a show populated primarily by cool small companies, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I really do think that people had the wrong idea with that. I mean, it made a huge amount of sense for Apple to stop coming and focus on the Apple stores, where when something shows up at the Apple store, you can actually buy it. That's the whole idea. You can put your hands on it, you can test it, you can buy it. That wasn't ever true at Macworld. And some of the things, I think the first iPhone, because it wasn't shipping, they had it encased in plastic, with security guards standing on each side of it. And, so yes, you could see it, but that was about it. So there wasn't really a big win from Apple. The main thing that I miss about the big companies, though, now that I think about it, is they used to have basically sort of presentation areas. And you could sit down, you can get the 5 or 10 minute presentation, or even sometimes longer, on how to use something. So often there was some training involved, just sort of as a good way to get an overview of what a product did. And so that is the one thing that I do miss about the larger companies not being there, because with everyone having, a tiny little booth, they might have a demo up, but it's not the same.
Yeah, but I would agree with you on the training part, and it was always fun to see people demo, the big bad programs. But they
were good programs sometimes too.
Oh yeah, I meant big and bad as in,
wolves.
Wolves, the positive stuff. But we have web demos now. We have, I think, at least as much, if not more, trial software, with the possible exception of things in the App Store and the Mac App Store. Yeah. So, it just, I don't know. I mean, I remember days when the days I would carry home 100 pounds of literature for my Mac user group, and now, if I take a stack of business cards and URLs, I've got it.
The first couple of Macworlds I went to, 89 and 90 in Boston, and then 90. We moved to Seattle in 1991, and I had filing cabinets full of all of the handouts because that was the only way you could get information and keep it around, for later reference. And you just, you picked up something at every booth. You had multiple bags you were carrying around by the end of the day. Oh, it was terrible. Now, business cards, and I take pictures with the iPhone.
Yeah. It's funny. I've been taking pictures. I still like to have the physical cards for a lot of reasons, but to make sure I don't lose anything, photos of everything. And I hardly, in fact, I don't pick up any literature anymore. If there's something I'm interested in, take a picture of the literature and put it back down on the table. Walk away.
Indeed. So I really don't, for the most part, miss the big companies. And one of the things I think has also changed really since the old days is that you have a lot more of sort of aggregator companies. What was the one? BiteMyApple.co or a Bite of the Apple. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but basically, they got a booth, and then they found 8 or 10 little people to come and be in the booth. And so even the number of exhibitors wasn't really quite accurate because a number of those single booths had a bunch of different little companies at them. And that was a huge amount of fun to just go around and see who was who. I had a talk with this guy who he was doing some kind of it was like a clock radio with. It was a Kickstarter project. He wasn't even finally. I think he was funded, but he wasn't. He hadn't even finished his Kickstarter yet. But you could set your iPhone on top of it, and it would charge inductively. And it was Bluetooth speakers, and it had LED lights underneath. So when you got notifications, it could flash lights in different colors. It was very cool. But he had literally heard the day before this company said, "Oh, we have an opening in our booth. How'd you like to come and be there?" And he's like, "Yes," and hopped on a plane from Brooklyn with his prototypes. He didn't have anything. He didn't have any materials. He didn't have anything. So it was hilarious. Nice to see.
I missed that one. Darn. That sounds like something I should be interested in. How about the Appaloosa area? That seems to be an area that's grown. It's the area where the exhibitors have small kiosks, basically that are staffed by 1 or 2 people, or they could be staffed by 1 or 2 people. A lot of them have other people hovering around to try to talk to people. Do you think that's an adequate presence at Macworld, Adam?
It is. Obviously, the reason why people are doing those is that they're a whole lot cheaper. I don't know the exact pricing, but it gets into the point where a small company can actually afford to do this kind of thing, as opposed to the 10 by 10 booths where you're probably talking $10,000 or something. But the Appaloosa was actually done better this year than, I don't know if they had a different name for it in the past, where they've done this a lot of times, but they've often fiddled with how many people they put in an area. I think one year they had 4 actually, so it was sort of this circular thing, and everyone would get a quadrant. And that was just too tight. If the guy next to you was popular, you stood no chance of anyone even being able to talk to you. And so this year it was just back to back, and so it made it pretty easy to actually talk to people. I forget who was it, MacPaw I was talking to. They're a Ukrainian company. And I was chatting with the guy, and he was very upfront about it. He said, the 2 reasons why we come to Macworld is 1, to see the media. Particularly when you're in Ukraine, it's a little harder to get to the media. And 2, actually, he wanted to talk to U.S. users. That, for him, just seeing how American users interacted with product and what they thought was actually valuable, because he didn't really have the right audience for usability testing and feature testing and things like that. So it was interesting to be able to chat with potential users for him.
I think that's something that a lot of us miss. We're there to see things and go to the conferences, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we forget that the exhibitors really are looking for feedback from us. I know Christian Pickman of Tech Tool, and I had that conversation that they were there. They were happy and glad to be back, but they were also getting a lot of feedback from people about their product and what they liked and what maybe they'd like to see added to it.
Yeah, and I think it's a different scenario. So yes, everyone can send email now, and yes, you can have online surveys, and that's all great. But I think you get a different impression when you're chatting with someone and they're saying, hey, what I really like is, or I cannot figure this out. Either side is good information, and again, the companies that are going with some intent will take back a lot of notes.
You mentioned Mac Paul being from the Ukraine. It seemed like there was
just Ukraine. I don't know. So I would say the Ukraine.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you for.
But there's a lot of companies from Ukraine.
Well, and there were a lot of companies from everywhere. That was the thing. It was hardly a U.S.-centric show, and I love that fact.
Yeah. Ukraine was really quite well represented. MacPaw, CS Odessa, MacFun. Beelight didn't have a booth, but I ran into a couple of their people. So I said, when I could come up with 4 companies from Ukraine off the top of my head, that's kind of impressive. I don't know what it is about Ukraine that makes it such a hotbed of Mac and iOS development, but more so than certainly any of the other Soviet era republics that we now have. You just don't see that much coming out of them. So why Ukraine? I don't know.
But you're right. There are a lot of companies that we both know that weren't at the show that seem to come from Ukraine. So
yeah.
Adam, how about the conferences? Did you get to any of the sessions? I know you didn't have anything else to do.
No. I almost never get to the sessions, and I went to the first morning keynote, which was a panel discussion moderated by Jason Snell of Macworld. But the sessions are really hard for me because it is so much about seeing the event, seeing the exhibitors, and talking to people. So if I spend 45 minutes sitting in a dark room watching someone, it might be interesting, but it's not what I'm there to do. And for the most part, they're not teaching the kinds of things that I need to know if it's a training talk. So that it's kind of what I do. So I don't really need to learn from other people about it for the most part.
But Tidbits and Take Control were pretty well represented. I know Joe did a bunch of sessions. Josh did sessions.
I calculated it out. We had about 10% of the sessions.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
But Joe Kissel did a ton. Josh did a couple. Rich Mogul did one at the Mac IT conference, which I don't quite understand how they're related. It sort of goes on at the same time as Macworld. We did. We had a bunch of people doing stuff, and I actually didn't do that. I didn't really do any this year just because they're a lot of work, and it's not like you get paid for them, and I just didn't need more on my plate. So I jumped into a session on publishing that Chris Breen asked us to do on the Macworld stage rather than the main stage. But whatever. Always happy to talk, but there is a limited amount of time.
Yeah, at one point, because I didn't realize that you were going to be on the main stage, I looked over and there you and Tanya and Chris are, and it's like, oh, darn, I should go over, but I can't because I'm busy, so,
Yeah.
What do you do?
Although I did hear from Joe and Josh and Jeff Carlson that their rooms were just packed in the conferences, which was great to see. That people were really going and liking what they were doing, and they everyone who I talked to had great feedback about all their sessions. So good, well worth doing if people want to learn that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I had the same experience with my sessions, and it's fun because you get a room full of people and they seem to be interested in what you're talking about, and then you realize when you start getting the questions or they chase you out into the hall that it really is they're very engaged.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot of fun. Adam, we have an audience here. Would you tell them to go to Macworld next year?
I think it's always worth going to Macworld. If you're the sort of person who's going to come out, on an evening, what are we at? It's a Tuesday evening to talk about Mac stuff, you'll enjoy going to Macworld. It's as simple as that. That there's always, interesting things to see. It's fun wandering around the booths. It's fun. It's actually fun going with someone or meeting someone there because it's actually it's kind of fun to do with other people. We actually had a Tidbits reader who just kind of fell in with us the first morning and ended up hanging out with us the entire time. Until well after we had lunch and at some point I was like, I got a meeting, I gotta go, but it was nice chatting with you, and so. I do think that that's worthwhile. I would say at this point that it's entertainment. Really, unless you are a professional who's going to the Mac IT stuff, really most of the conferences and certainly the exhibits type stuff not a significant business win. It's just not that kind of conference anymore.
That's interesting. I'm not sure I completely agree, depending on which sessions we're talking about, obviously. But there's some that, and I'm saying this because I'm going based on what the people I talk to. Maybe not strictly for business, but for a special interest kind of thing, or something you particularly want to do. If there's a conference on it,
but that's what I still think that's entertainment for the most part. I mean, it's not. We're not talking a lot of productivity stuff. We're not talking, kind of the high end networking stuff. And that's what's happening over at the Mac IT conference. And so, if that's your field, then you'll want to go there, where they're talking about, IPv6 and doing managed devices for iOS in big organizations. That's where it becomes a really useful event for your career. Whereas, I said, most of the stuff on the show floor is pretty consumer based.
Okay, so we got to get to this point, and it's kind of obvious. But what turns your head? What products, hardware or software?
Well, the thing that I want yesterday, but I have to wait for still, is Busy Contacts from Busy Mac. I just really, really dislike the Contacts app from Apple. I disliked it when it was Address Book. I've disliked it for a very long time. And I was a now up to date and Contacts user for many years. And not that now Contact was perfect, but boy, it did a whole lot. And Contacts just bugs me. So to have the guys at Busy Mac who did a really nice job with BusyCal, doing Busy Contacts is something I'm looking forward to. Public beta probably in a couple months. So we'll be seeing that. That was awfully cool. There was this thing called Ring, which was literally a ring that you could put on your finger, and in theory gesture with, so you could write, or you could, and depending on the app on your iPhone or iPad, you could control different, various aspects of the app. It got a ton of buzz, but it was kind of only in prototype form. They weren't really showing anything. I think they'd raised something like, what was it, $840,000 on Kickstarter. So, and they'd only asked for $250. So, they were rolling in it. But I'll be really curious to see if that actually is useful in any way, shape, or form. Let's see. One thing that I just thought it was funny was...
we have a question. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, we see your lips moving.
There you go.
And we'll do
There we go. Yes, sir.
Can you guys hear me? I'm Clay Roberts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Was there anything similar to what was on sale today, Google Glass, the glasses? Is there anything that Apple's doing in that regard that might be coming out?
I didn't see anything along the lines of Google Glass. There was one thing, Chuck, did you see it? I think it was called Eclipse.
No.
It wasn't. It was as close as I've seen, and I didn't get a chance to look at it at the show, but I didn't realize what it was until afterwards. But it was basically goggles that you put on. You can't see anything, but it worked as a full kind of virtual reality immersive screen. And that was the closest I saw. I did not see anyone doing anything Google Glass like at the show that would connect to Apple stuff. We did have fun. We of course get back on we get back on the 31st and have to put out a Tidbits issue because that's a Monday, and writing all that stuff up, and then we had to turn around and put out an April Fool's issue because Tidbits always does an April Fool's issue. And one of the things I wrote for the April Fool's issue was about how Apple's Google Glass competitor was going to be called iPatch. And it would be a front-facing camera, so you'd have the whole black thing covering your eye, and then you could see through the camera. Yeah. I think it's a win, so we'll see if Apple catches up with that. The really funny thing was I came up with the idea for this and wrote it up, and then I went and Googled on it and found out that someone else had the idea and done a really nice graphic for it. So we asked him, and he let us use his graphics. But no, I don't think I've seen Apple do anything in that space yet. There's a lot of talk about smartwatches, which we did. There was a bit at the show about smartwatches, not so much on the floor, but a lot of people had the Pebbles. This is a Pebble that I've got on my wrist. So that's probably where we're going to more see Apple working.
What is the next big thing very good. Got three guesses. What's going to conquer the world?
Man, if I knew that,
we'd be buying stock.
I personally think the next big thing is going to be for parents, and it's going to be the instant nap. You press a button, your kid goes to sleep for 30 minutes. Next billionaire, I'm telling you. My son's 15, so I don't need this anymore. But let me tell you, I would have paid any amount for it a bunch of years ago. So no, this came up during the keynote. In fact, the question of sort of whether wearables would be the next big thing. And one of the things that people pointed out in that is that the prices and the margins just aren't high enough. So, like the Pebble here is $150, and most of the smartwatches are sort of in that, $75 to $200 range. And people spend a fair amount of money on fancy fashion watches, but, do you think someone's going to spend $600 or $1,000 on a watch? Yeah, that seems a little unlikely, especially given the guaranteed limitations of the screen size. So the point being that the smartphone world seems to be where the money is and where the money is going to be for quite a while yet. So although wearables, could be a big deal, they're unlikely to actually change the world. They're more likely to be these little adjuncts that you have as a way of not having to, pull your smartphone out of your pocket. So, so any notification I get on my phone will appear on my watch too, which is in different situations is quite handy. I found actually the killer app for the Pebble was Google Maps walking directions in San Francisco. Because I had a meeting off-site at some point. I just, asked Google Maps the best way to go and put the phone in my pocket, and without even really thinking about it. And as I got to the next intersection, my watch buzzed and said, "Turn right." And I thought, that's great. This is exactly what I need in the city. So I'm not, kind of sitting there, in front of my phone saying, "Wow, I look like a tourist. Come and take my phone." So that was pretty neat, and it was nice having the watch buzzing me, telling me about meetings and things like that. Which, you're in a busy, loud show floor, you can miss alerts if it's in your pocket. And and as Tanya pointed out, women don't carry iPhones in their pockets, so they really do miss alerts.
One thing about going to Macworld, folks, if you go, you have to be careful with the company you keep, because if you keep the wrong company, they cost you money. That's your fault, Adam. That's your fault, and Jason Snell's fault.
There you go.
Because after seeing yours and talking to both of you, I went out and got one. 4 days later, I went to NAB, and now I'm addicted to having this on my wrist.
Yeah.
It's so. I mean, even for its limited functionality, and I haven't done the Google walking directions, but it's made a big difference. It really has.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so sometimes it's just fun. So, for instance, I have a weather app called Dark Sky, and it has a notification option, so it can tell you when rain is about to start, for instance, and that's a notification. So, every now and then, I'll the watch will buzz, and I'll look down, and it's like light rain starting soon.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah. Not necessarily a big deal, but there's times when it could be handy.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are folks in the audience, and then they're going to listen to this later and going to say, "Well, gee, that's are you really that spoiled?" Well, on a noisy show floor or in a busy environment, you don't hear your phone in your pocket, or maybe you just don't want it ringing, but you would like to not miss the call. It's super convenient to have it buzz on your wrist, and you can do a quick glance that really if someone thinks you're checking the time, and you see who it is and whether you need to take the call or not.
Right.
So,
and it is an interesting, it's an interesting social issue, because if you look at your watch, you are saying, I'm checking the time, I might need to move on, which is not always what you want to imply, but I personally believe that that's less obtrusive than looking at your phone.
Yeah.
And, that may be a generational thing, that, all the cool kids just look at their phones all the time, so, who knows, but... we were out to dinner at a restaurant, a fairly nice restaurant, and this couple was clearly on a date, both looking at their phones. I looked over and just laughed at them.
Yeah, they were texting each other probably.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Adam, one other thing that happened while we were in San Francisco that wasn't at the show, Microsoft announced Office for the iPad. And I'm kind of anxious to get your opinion on this. I know there was a bit of discussion in a couple of the sessions I was in about whether this is relevant, whether it's past time, whether it's going to drive any kind of extra iPad adoption by Windows users.
I do have to insert a caveat, which is that I haven't even downloaded these. At this point, Office plays almost no role in my life. So there was not a reason for me to get them. But that said, in the first week, they had 12 million downloads of these apps, and they're free to use for sort of reading and presenting. So you can't create anything with them without paying some money, but you can move documents from your Mac or your PC over to them and then use them that way in read-only mode. And then if you want to actually create documents with them, you have to sign up for Office 365, which is, a subscription-based service. And you can either pay, $99 a year or $9.95 a month for using Office on up to 5 machines, including Macs. So if you don't have Office, $100 a year gets you Office on your Mac and your iPad and your Windows PC as well. They also just today, in fact, introduced the personal plan. So if you only want it on one device, it drops it to $69.95 a year. In both cases, you might be able to get it cheaper through Amazon, so you don't even have to pay the full retail price. And that's actually, I think that's actually a pretty good deal. And I think the main people who are unhappy about that are people who have bought Office already and don't want to pay again just to get it on the iPad. So, but if you're not, if you haven't already paid for Office, it's a pretty reasonable deal. We published a review by Julio Ojeda Zapata of the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and he looked in pretty good detail at these, and actually, we responded to a lot of comments and checked into things for us, and he was pretty impressed with these apps. That he said that you could do a whole lot with them. They were very well thought out. There was excellent document fidelity moving back and forth between the Mac version and the iPad version. And just in general, he was impressed. That I think the important thing to remember is that it's probably not a reason to use the iPad, but if you are an Office user already and you have an iPad, it's kind of a no-brainer. And that's really the key, is that we often in the Mac world, particularly those of us who are not really in the enterprise world, kind of poo-poo Office. Oh yeah, no one really uses that anymore, and I admit I don't. But the fact is, if you are in a business, you're using Office. That you need to be able to move documents between platforms, share stuff with outside vendors, all that kind of stuff. The world runs on Office still. And the iPad has become so popular that being able to extend your Office reach to the iPad is a really big deal.
So what are the implications for this for Microsoft and the Surface or any subsequent tablets? Did they surrender, Adam?
Before we get into that, we have a question there?
Oh.
Just,
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Just very quickly, how much of Office does Apple get when somebody downloads, and how much revenue does it generate for them?
So this is an interesting point. So you have to subscribe to Office 365. You do not have to do it within the Office apps, but you can. So if you subscribe to Office 365 by buying a $70 package on Amazon and saving yourself $30, then Apple gets nothing. If you use the in-app purchase within the iPad apps themselves, then Apple gets 30% of that. So Apple will be making some money based on that, although we had to recommend that it made much more sense to go to Amazon and buy it because it's $30 cheaper, and for the 5 users, and it's a little bit fussier to do. You can't do it right from the app, but for $30, you're saving 30% there, so that's a good deal. I'm sorry, Chuck, the rest of your question was?
Well, I guess the question is, what does this mean for Apple, for Microsoft and its Surface or any subsequent tablets? Have they surrendered?
No, it's not a surrender. I don't think. I think it is showing that Satya Nadella, the new CEO, is pulling back from sort of the Microsoft first approach and being a little more pragmatic. The simple fact is the Surface tablets, which we've also reviewed, and they're not bad. And if you need certain kinds of things, the Surface tablets are nowhere near as popular as the iPad. So, from a simple, how many of your users can you empower with Office on a platform? The iPad is obvious. And yeah, they should get it done on Surface too, because it's a little embarrassing that they haven't. But the fact is that it was more important for them to get it out for the, however many 100 million, 200 million iPad users there are these days. I haven't looked recently, but it's always one of those very, very large numbers.
And I get torn because I think it's good for the iPad platform. I wonder if it's going to be a gateway drug toward the Mac OS or whether it's so enterprise driven. I thought I saw a hand. Did I see a hand?
I got David wants to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, David Maines. Just wanted to know if you all saw Bare Bones at the Macworld. Were they there?
No, Bare Bones was not there this year. They didn't have anything new to announce, and so they chose to take this year off.
Okay.
And that's to circle back to Macworld for a second. It's an interesting model that a number of companies I know, and you do too, Adam. They seem to go in every other year cycles, or they just come if they have something to announce.
I think it makes sense that if you don't have anything to announce, and I'll cop to this, I will go up to a company, I'll say, what do you got that's new? That if it's not new, as a member of the press, I'm not really interested. That it's not news to me if it's not new. And so I do think that people suffer a little from just that focus on the new, but that's what happens at the show. So, if you are largely looking for coverage, then you will take off if you don't have. Because remember, it's not just the booth space, that's expensive and you've got to sign up way in advance. But the travel and lodging and food for say 4 or 5 employees. It costs a lot to exhibit at Macworld. And so I think that the smart companies have basically said, well, we'll do it on an every other basis, or we'll only do it when we feel like we have some bang for our buck.
Folks, our field of vision is a little limited by the camera, so if anybody else is raising their hands, we can't see. So anybody else have any questions at this point?
Cool.
Okay, silence is golden. Silence is golden. Adam, let's take a.
We did get one here.
With the watches, would that be useful for, say, someone that loses their phone a lot, or has to reach deep in their purse for it and then it quits ringing by the time they find it? Or
well, yes and no. With the iPhone, the watch is merely sort of a one-way conduit. The only thing the watch can send back to the phone is it can act as a music controller. So if you're playing music on your iPhone, you can tap buttons on your watch to pause it or move on to the next track, that sort of thing. And it doesn't do anything in terms of letting you talk on the phone. So it's useful for getting a notification on your phone in your purse and knowing about that sooner. But it's not going to let you answer it from your wrist. And it's possible that other watches will do in the future. That one of the things that I think is absolutely true about the watches right now is you should not assume that anyone will be relevant for more than 6 months to a year. That the field is just moving too fast. I bought this, and literally 2 hours later, Google announced Android Wear, the version of Android for wearables. Really? 2 hours is how long this actually was good. I haven't even gotten it yet. I just ordered it and it's already obsolete. So I do think that's going to be something to keep in mind. the Pebble, in particular with Android, can do a little bit more because the Android is a much more open platform than iOS. So I don't offhand know the details because I don't have an Android phone, but my understanding is that you can do some more interesting things in having the watch control the phone back in the other direction.
But also to answer your question, and now having been a newly minted Pebble user, thanks to Adam and Jason, my wallet is a little lighter. Thank you, guys. I find it extremely useful during the business day when my personal phone goes off to be able to look at my wrist, see who's calling, and if it's not someone in my address book or a number I recognize, just let it go to voicemail.
Yeah.
It instead of having to, stand up from the desk, dig through my pocket, pull the phone out, and try to identify who it is. And by then, at least 2 or 3 rings have gone by, and I have to make that decision a lot quicker. So it just depends on your use case. But
Yeah.
I guess the thing is, up to this point, I had sort of dismissed it as being a little bit of a toy, and now I feel like it even in this fashion, this limited fashion, it still serves a purpose for me.
I forget where I saw this point made, but wearables are within the bubble of your body. That a phone is not necessarily. You have to hold the phone. It goes in your pockets. It goes on the desk. It's on the. People put their phones on the table when they go out to dinner. That kind of thing. It's near you, no question, but it is not on you. It is not within that that kind of atmosphere of your body where different things become true. So, for instance, the vibration of the watch is not noticeable by other people. So it's something that you feel, but no one else does. So it's a little bit like, I've only tried Google Glass very briefly once, but it's the same thing with Google Glass. You can see things that other people can't. And with Google Glass, you kind of look a little funny because you're sort of looking off to the side instead of focusing on them. But nonetheless, it's the same basic principle.
But does your phone not ring when you're wearing your watch? Is it phone set to silent?
It could be. I have the phone set to vibrate all the time, and I never have the ringer on because I don't like to hear phones. But that's just personal preference. But yes, you could presumably set the turn the vibrate off on the phone entirely and have it be completely silent and just have your wrist buzz. And I'm still figuring out some of this stuff, honestly. So, but one of the cool things, I don't know if you can see this. Let me take mine off. You can have different watch faces. So I don't know if you can read that, but right now it says 8:53. But I've got another watch face here which is fuzzy, so it just says 5 to 9. And it seems like it's a small thing, and then I have another one which gives me the time in 24-hour time and shows me the weather. But in different places, like in San Francisco, I wanted the exact time and I wanted the weather at all times. When I'm home, I don't really care about exact time in the slightest, and I can look out the window to see what the weather's like. So I will not generally have that face up. So that's sort of one of the things that you can adjust how it behaves based on your context and what you care about at that particular time.
And I guess I have one of the classic faces too. Again,
you're going old school, man.
Well, it looks more like a watch I would wear with one of these, and so it's not nearly as obtrusive. People don't look at it and say, "Oh, you got one of those fancy watches." They just think that you have, an analog watch. This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by our newest sponsor, Harry's. Shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. I'm very, very happy to welcome Harry's as a sponsor of MacVoices. I've been using Harry's shaving products now for some time, comparing them to other specialty products, as well as the retail off-the-shelf razors and creams, and I've been more than a little satisfied. Okay, that's what they all say, right? What does satisfied really mean? For me, lots of things, and I'll be telling you about each in turn. To start with, though, it's always going to be about the shave. Harry's blades are engineered in Germany for sharpness and durability, and that should say something to you right there. There are plenty of options for cheap blades. And you're the one who's going to suffer if you go that direction. And I do mean suffer, since this is your face that we're talking about. Harry's cares so much about your face that they just purchased a 93-year-old German factory that makes those blades. That also says something about them. Even though they're only 1 year old, they have disrupted the shaving industry and are clearly in it for the long haul. When was the last time you saw a 1-year-old company buy a 93-year-old German factory? Right after the shave is, of course, the price. No matter how good the shave, there's still the matter of price. And that's where we have more good news. You can try out Harry's quality for as little as $10 by getting started with the Truman handle and a blade, in multiple colors even. Or step up to the Truman SS14, the Winston, or get a personalized shaving experience with the engraved Winston. Or get an even better value by starting with one of Harry's shave sets that includes a handle, 2 blades, and Harry's special shave cream. No matter what package or razor you start with, give Harry's a try. Your shaving experience can only improve with Harry's. You're a Mac user, right? You appreciate quality, precision, superior performing products by definition. That's why I want you to go right now to harrys.com and use the promo code MacVoices so that they know I sent you and that you expect a quality experience. And Harry's will deliver. That's harrys.com with the promo code MacVoices. You won't be disappointed. Harry's, the shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. Thanks to Harry's for becoming the newest sponsor of MacVoices. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I know that Apple hired the female CEO of Burberry, and apparently Burberry was really doing well as a stock, and as far as most of what they sell, apparel, stuff like that. There's got to be some overwhelming reason to have hired her. I would presume in the wearable field.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember. I'm just looking this up in tidbits. I think she was starting this month. She wasn't starting right away.
Yeah, this month, or not long from now, I think.
Yeah, I'm not seeing this off really quickly. But in any event, yeah, she was. I mean, when the announcement came out well before she was actually going to start. So I think there is no question that her experience both in retail and in fashion is going to be a big deal for Apple, because Apple is fashionable. Simple fact of the matter that, you know, Apple has always done devices that play as much on their looks as their function. And so, and I mean, the thing, I'm commenting on this in the past too, one of the things that's fascinating about Apple is that they cross ages for fashion. I mean, what other product will you see guys in ties being happy to show off as much as, you know, teenage hipsters? You know, not much. And so, you know, it's utter brilliance on Apple's part, and I'm sure that they want, you know, even more of that kind of thinking on board.
Adam, the whole wearables thing, you know, you and I are pointing at the Pebble right now. You mentioned the Ring we saw at Macworld. There was someone there showing a little clip that you put on that not only monitored your step count but also would monitor your posture.
Oh, the Lumo Lift, yeah.
Thank you, the Lumo Lift.
I'm getting
yes.
that when it comes out too.
Okay. Of course, there are the inevitable fitness trackers that, you know, track everything from your sleep to your running and everything in between. I'm trying to think. I think those were the main things, but it feels like the whole wearable thing. Yeah, it's coming, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not. It's going to happen.
I was just looking up that article about Angela Ahrendts, and I was on Mashable, and one of their top articles was something called the Rufus Cuff, wrist communicator, a step above the smartwatch. And, you know, and you're just seeing all sorts of people experimenting in this field right now. And that's great, because we'll start to see what works, what doesn't work. You know, do we want this thing to be a standalone device? Do we want it to be slaved to a smartphone? Does that make sense? Probably does. But, you know, this Rufus Cuff thing, which looks like it's an Indiegogo project, is not. You know, that it seems to be, you know, a full screen on your wrist, Whether they can make that, not look stupid is another question.
Well, I saw someone that had, and Adam, you'd be more familiar with it, the arm cuffs that you can put your iPhone on your arm when you're running. He had one of those on his forearm. Had him on his forearm and had his iPhone mounted there, which, looked a little geeky. But on the other hand, I actually thought, I can see a use case for that until a fully functional, full-blown smartwatch of some kind appears.
Yeah. I will note that one of the criticisms of these things has been made, which I think is a little bit of a lame criticism, is the whole sleeve problem. You've got to get your cuff over or under or whatnot. And, the watch is a watch, you do it or you're not. But, you put a whole big thing there, and I think the sleeve will be a problem.
Like the Galaxy Gear?
Yeah. Just a little too large to actually wear on your wrist if you're not in California wearing short sleeves all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Those of us who live in winter climates, sorry.
Yeah.
Not bitter and twisted that it's snowing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little bitter and twisted.
Yeah. But your point, I think, about Angela coming on board with Apple is a good one. Those are going to be some of the things. And if you want an example of something that doesn't work, go look at a Galaxy Gear. I mean, I know a lot of, especially men, wear large fashion watches, but nothing like that. I mean, that looks like a 1960s remote control strapped to your wrist. It's horrible. It's horrible.
If only it had the little antenna that came up and rotated.
Yeah. Other questions from TUMS? Okay. Well, Adam, let's go.
Fine, Chuck, I had it muted, so we do have a question.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks, Lynn.
How close in proximity do you have to be to your phone when you have the watch on, like what Adam has on?
Oh, that's a good question. It's Bluetooth and Bluetooth low energy, so I would guess you have to be fairly close, probably within 5 or 10 feet. For me, it's never really been an issue because I tend to have the phone in my pocket at all times, and I haven't actually done the testing to see how far away I have to go. The Tidbits will be running an article about smartwatches hopefully soon. I got to get the author to finish it off. But the idea was for me to partly be able to finish off some of the details on the Pebble, which is partly why I got the Pebble. So we'll know a little bit more about that. Partly because it's a notification device. You probably wouldn't want to get too far from your phone anyway, because if you get a notification, then you got to go find your phone to reply to the message or answer the phone call or whatever. So, it certainly works, 4 or 5 feet away, but I wouldn't expect it, to be able to leave your phone charging in the kitchen and go upstairs to the bedroom and have it work reliably.
It is a great question, though, and I hadn't thought about it. I've got to test it after we get off of here.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I was like, okay. And I will say that, I don't know if you've noticed this, Chuck, but I was a little worried about battery life. And, because early on I wanted to make sure it was going to work at Macworld when I had it, so I was charging it every day. But it goes a full week for me without charging.
Yeah, I burned mine down a bit faster than that at NAB because it seemed like every 30 minutes I was getting some kind of notification from them through their app. But it's not like it didn't last for a good solid 2 days without me having to worry about it. And one thing I really liked, when it did give me a power warning, I still had plenty left.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, I forgot to charge it last night. It's 9 a.m. and I'm getting a message that it's going to be dead in an hour.
And it charged very quickly.
It charged very quickly.
So if you plug it in, you can plug it in for even 10 or 15 minutes. That'll give you a good jolt.
Yeah. The only thing that was a design decision, it's a very convenient magnetic, sort of like the MagSafe connector, not exactly like it, but the same concept, as opposed to a USB mini. So it means that if I'm traveling, I'm going to have to carry that cable with me, and that's a little bit of an annoyance, but it's a small one.
The other thing that's actually kind of interesting about it is if you wear sunglasses, polarized sunglasses, you'll discover the screen is polarized very oddly. It's a little hard to read with sunglasses on. It's not just, you can't just tilt your head in one direction. It's like it's because the glass is curved, it polarizes in different spots. So that is the one thing I will be curious to see if it's just truly annoying in the summer.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
But part of the reason why actually, Tanya wants to try it is, let's say you go biking and you have your phone in your bike bag, you're not gonna, you don't want to be paying attention to your phone, but it might be useful to have an alert coming in if someone needs to get in touch with you, and then you can pull over and and deal with the phone. So I just think there's some interesting possibilities there.
Yeah. Lynn, other questions from there?
No, I don't have anybody in the audience, but I was thinking before you wrap up, might get Adam to talk about the Heartbleed.
Oh yeah,
that's exactly where I was going when you're reading my mind, because I figured we'd take a little turn into the geeky. Adam, Heartbleed. I'll just turn you loose.
Heartbleed's bad. So for people who haven't heard or have just heard generally about Heartbleed, it is a bug in a program called OpenSSL, which is an open source SSL server. And SSL is the security encryption that's used whenever you see HTTPS in a URL. So if you're talking to a bank, or frankly Apple uses it in a lot of places, if Google uses it in a lot of places, anywhere where you want your communications with that website to be encrypted back and forth, use SSL. And OpenSSL is a good open source implementation, and a lot of people use it. A very, very large number of people use it. I've seen numbers up to like the 500,000 websites. Could be more, could be less. Hard to really say. And what this bug does, this is a truly, truly bad bug, is it allows an attacker to see a random 64K chunk of the memory of the server. And you can just keep doing this attack, so you can just keep getting 64K chunks of the server memory. So anything that's going to be in the server memory, usernames, passwords, encryption keys, confidential data, you name it, someone who has this, can exploit this bug can get. So this is about as bad as we've seen a bug get, frankly, and there's unfortunately not very much users can do. The sites have to fix this, and once the site has installed a new version of OpenSSL, and they also have to do some fiddling with their SSL certificates to make sure they get new ones, then users can change their passwords. But if there's no point in changing your password before then, because you'll just have to do it again. And you do want to change your password because the bad guys, if they attacked the site, could very well have your password already. So this, Bruce Schneier, who's a security expert, one of the best known security guys, said that this, on a scale of 1 to 10, this was an 11. This one really did go all the way to 11. But sites are fixing quickly, and we haven't yet heard of anyone who knows of any damage related to this. Unfortunately, there is no logging that could take place, so if someone was attacked, they would have no way of knowing.
Yes, sir. A question from TUMS.
Apparently this Heartbleed bug has been around for a couple of years.
Yep.
And obviously it's to the fore now. How did everybody find out about it? Was it Apple that found out? Who found out?
Google actually found it.
Uh-huh.
And so there's always a tension when some kind of security vulnerability is discovered, because if you just keep it quiet, then companies will not feel that they need to do updates. Oh, no one's going to learn about that. It's not that big a deal. We'll put it off. Whereas if you go public with it, the bad guys can figure it out and exploit it immediately. So, but at the same time, because the bad guys can do this, there's a lot of incentive for all the companies to fix the problem very, very quickly. I don't know the backstory entirely. My understanding is that the OpenSSL people, that open source crowd, fixed the problem, and then basically the news went live. So no one had to wait to download a new version and install a new version of SSL, OpenSSL, but it went public so that everyone was pushed really, really hard to fix immediately. And it was available for 2 years, and there's two ways to think about this. There are two general categories of people who try to steal information on the internet. There's online criminals, and then there's government intelligence agencies. Simple as that. Online criminals probably didn't know about this. And the reason they probably didn't is because if they had, they would have used that information right away. Do you think about it? If you're a criminal and you come across someone's credit card information or their username or password, you're going to exploit that right away before it changes. You don't want to let the opportunity go to waste. Whereas if you're, the NSA or Chinese intelligence or whatever, you're just going to be happy to hoover up this information and sit on it. It's useful information to you in your archive. So the belief is that criminals, for the most part, did not have this information because they would have had to have an incredibly long-term play based on something that we don't know about. Whereas there are conflicting reports as to whether the NSA was able to exploit it. Bloomberg had some people who said that the NSA had done it. The White House denied it. There's no way of knowing, frankly. And there's not a lot we can do about it one way or another. So, as long as the sites are patched and you change your passwords on those sites now, you're safe going forward. That's about all we can say.
Yes, sir.
What benefit do the security firms such as FireEye, Palo Alto, Fortinet, what do they have a role in stopping some of these Fortune 500 companies from getting those bugs?
Yeah, I think in the case of Heartbleed and OpenSSL, it really was completely unknown by the community, and so I think most of the kind of the independent security firms wouldn't have been able to necessarily help protect against that. With the caveat, though, that if you design a system with security in mind, you might have had more layers, so that even if this OpenSSL layer was compromised, other layers would not be. And here's my example of that. There's a password manager called LastPass, and it's what I use. It's a very good password manager, and even though it's web-based and they used OpenSSL, they were never vulnerable. And the reason why they were never vulnerable is they had designed their system so that even though they're using OpenSSL to control the communication between you and them, they had encryption going on before the data was sent over the encrypted channel. So it was doubly encrypted, and then before it gets to their servers. So as a result, even if someone broke the first level of encryption via OpenSSL and Heartbleed, they were still going to be seeing an encrypted stream on that. And LastPass never had the keys that were necessary to decrypt that second stream. So one of the important things to figure out whenever you're talking about cloud services is who owns the keys, who holds them. Because if you hold them, no one's going to be breaking it. Probably not even the NSA. However, if Dropbox owns the keys or Apple has the keys, those keys can be subpoenaed, they can be stolen, they can be compromised. We don't expect that to happen, but it's possible. So there's, for instance, the Crash Plan Backup Service. You can set it up in two different ways. You can say, I'm going to use my Crash Plan password as the key generator, at which point they hold the key. Or you can make up your own key, at which point you hold the key. And in the former case, your data is certainly as safe as anyone can expect it to be, but it is possible for it to be, read by a Crash Plan employee. If you hold the key, it is not possible. It is simply secure, and there's just no way around it. On the other hand, if you lose the key, all your data is gone, and there is no way to get it back. Whereas if you lose the key and Crash Plan holds it, then you can get it back. So it's always a bit of a trade-off there.
Adam, one thing I wanted to ask you to clarify. There's also been a lot of discussion about Heartbleed being built into certain pieces of network hardware. And that's probably more, in a lot of ways, more troublesome than having it as a software vulnerability, because now those pieces of hardware, really, they have to be replaced.
Yes and no. I think I would be surprised if the majority of this stuff could not be updated. I mean, your random Linksys router can, you can download new versions of the software and update the firmware, basically. So, it's possible that will be true of some things, and there are certainly possibilities where it may not be cost effective. There may be too many of them, or maybe they're old anyway, and this is a good excuse to replace them. That if you have to put an hour of person time into updating all this stuff, it may be worth just throwing it away and getting a new one. So yeah, I mean, it's not a good thing, don't get me wrong, but I think it is. I'm not sure it's as big a deal as it might be. I mean, again, this is all really bad. I mean, this is one of those things where, if you use Dropbox or you use Yahoo or you use Facebook, you're going to want to change your password. Those sites and a whole lot of others are vulnerable. Luckily, most of the financial and banking sites seem not to be. That, again, they designed their systems to be a higher level of security, partly because they have to. There are laws surrounding that, and so they were less vulnerable. Google was sort of nominally vulnerable, but I think it was another situation where Google had a system that was so complex that even if one portion of it was compromised, the data was actually on a different server entirely, so that they didn't feel that it was actually possible for it to be compromised that way. Apple doesn't seem to have been compromised in any way, and a lot of sites that either frankly used older software or used entirely different software. They didn't rely on the open source approach. Just didn't happen to be vulnerable in this case.
I'd say we're just about at time, so I want to give the folks at TUMS one last opportunity to ask any questions they have about anything that we've talked about, or just anything else in general.
Any other questions?
Yes.
There's one. Yes, sir.
I got one last question. I believe, Adam, you said you're going to want to change your passcodes. I thought there's no sense in rushing to do it now, because if the servers don't clear up their problem, so we really don't know when to change our passcodes. In other words, if we go ahead and what should we here in Tulsa do?
Well, you are absolutely right, and the problem is that you should not change your passwords until it is time to do so, which means that the company has updated to the latest version of OpenSSL, and they have revoked and reissued their SSL certificates. The problem is that it can be difficult to know when those things are true. So, good companies are sending out emails saying we've done this. Although most of them are not saying, we've revoked our SSL certificates, because I think they don't want to scare people, or they think they'll just confuse people. So I don't think I've seen anyone use those words, unfortunately. But I've heard from I don't know, 5 or 6 companies. No really large ones, honestly. And that's been a little distressing that it hasn't been more widespread. The LastPass people actually, if you haven't been using it, this won't be helpful, but they have a security challenge feature built into their system where they can, the security challenge looks at all your passwords for all your sites and tells you which ones are weak, tells you which ones are duplicates, which is a bad idea. And what they added to do that is, or they added to that feature, is the ability to look at all sort of known sites in, that were affected by the bug, and whether or not your password and their SSL certificate have, sort of match up in dates. So if you last changed your password 2 years ago and the SSL certificate was changed yesterday, that's a good time to change your password. And so they will actually give you a list of sites that you should go and update, and ones that you should wait because they haven't yet given out a new SSL certificate. So again, not helpful if you haven't been using LastPass already, but it is a good thing for those who are using it. Mashable, again, has a nice article listing a bunch of very high-profile sites that were known to be affected and those were not known to be affected. So it's worth looking at that list as well. If you go to the Tidbits website, the top link on our homepage will, the article that's about Heartbleed there has a link to the Mashable site too.
The Tidbits homepage.
Adam,
Yeah, keep going.
I've got a copy of Take Control of Your Privacy
Yes,
to give away tonight.
excellent.
I assume that some of these things are addressed there as far as passwords and so forth, not Heartbleed itself, but
Yeah, and Take Control of Online Privacy doesn't say a huge amount about passwords because, frankly, we have another book called Take Control of Your Passwords, which is the real source of information for that. But Take Control of Your Online Privacy is meant to be a little bit more general and help you think about what you wish to make available to others and what makes sense to be making available in which ways. Because privacy is one of those things where there's no specific answer, that you can't just say, here's what you should do. You should say, how concerned are you about this?
right.
And everyone's going to have a different answer to that. And that's what Joe Kissel's goal in writing that book was to help you figure out what your answer is and how to answer it and change things for you for that purpose. Frankly, get into too much detail there would just be insane because all the browsers are constantly updating and everything's changing all the time. So if we got into step-by-step instructions, it would just fall flat within weeks anytime we released it. Yeah.
Yes.
One final question. I'm sorry. 1Password. You mentioned LastPass, Adam. 1Password. I know I got something from them where they said that they weren't affected or they were good to go. What about Keeper? Do you know about that?
I do not know about Keeper. One thing, LastPass is specifically, they posted saying why they weren't affected. 1Password, the Agile Bits also had a blog post explaining why they were not affected. And basically, they're just not in any way related to OpenSSL, so they were okay with that. Keeper, I don't know, but what I say in the article about other password managers is they have to be transparent about what's going on. So they should have a blog post or a support article or something on their homepage saying what the deal is. And if they don't, send them email. And they should be answering that right away because this is the big news right now. And anyone who is doing anything related to security or running a website should have a statement about it. If you go to the Take Control website, we put up something on the homepage saying we're not affected because we're not. But people are asking that very question, and I think companies are frankly not doing as good a job as they should be about being transparent about what's going on, what users need to do. So, yeah, feel free to hammer them an email.
Lynn, anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well,
Excellent.
Adam, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. TUMS, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun.
Very welcome. Glad y'all came out tonight.
Yeah. Adam, we'll see you again soon. TUMS, we'll hope to see you again soon as well.
Indeed.
Sounds good.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joiner. This is MacVoices. Check our show notes for links to some of the things Adam was talking about with regard to Heartbleed. I'll make sure there's some resources in there. At the very least, the article on Tidbits that will take you to other places. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.